Welcome everybody. Thank you to Liberty for the program. And we have some questions. And yes, well, okay. Tepsa, you've just put analyzing poems. And I don't know what you need, okay? So I'm going to try. And then if you want something else, post your response and I'll try to interact with that. So when you say analyzing poems, let's just have a look at this. This is a poem called Captive, and it's just the first stanza. So what is the first step? Think about what I have done with you. We've talked over and over again about intensive reading. So it doesn't matter if you're reading a poem or, Chepsa, you've also asked about a novel. So it doesn't matter if it's novel or poem or article for your comprehension. Your intensive reading skills are exactly the same. So let's go back to this and don't say, oh, I'm not doing Captive. I'm going to go away and get a cup of coffee and I'll come back in 10 minutes. You stay with me, please. So we can have a look at how you read. So you start with the title, and I've said this often enough before. You look at the title and you say, okay, what is captive? Well, you should know capture, which is the verb. If you capture something, you take it and it cannot escape. Captive is the noun. So a captive is a person who cannot escape. Then we've got a bit of help here. It says lament, there's another word, of a sick Xhosa mine laborer, do we know laborer, in a compound, do we know compound, hospital. Right, so vocab. I seem to have shouted at people about vocab all day. My grade 11s, I was really irritated this morning. They didn't know wholesome. Those of you who are doing Hamlet, wholesome is in Act 1, Scene 1 of Hamlet. I was wondering if it's 1 or 2. Didn't know wholesome. Then I was irritated with the grade 12s. They didn't know precipice. So I cannot emphasize enough the need to improve your vocabulary. Now, grade 12s, don't say, oh, but we've only got a month. What can we do now? Right. You've got the rest of your lives. If you're going to read in English, it's English vocabulary. If you're going to read, speak, communicate, write in any other language, it's that language's vocabulary. You need to be interested in words and expanding your vocabulary always. So one of my grade 11 said, okay, if I looked at a word like impotent, which is also in Hamlet, is that a good word to use? Well, yes, actually. Potent means powerful. The prefix, you know how I always do word attack skills, means not. And you could say something like, as I said to her, imagine I wanted to say, I'd love to change the education system, but I'm impotent. I am powerless. But with help from a company like Liberty, we are trying to move education forward. So, vocabulary. What are you doing about your vocabulary every day? Which means you've got to read and look up the words. And is it a painful, boring effort? Yes. So lament, this is a noun. It is a cry, a wail. Do we know wail? Of a sick mine laborer. He is Xhosa. So he's a black mine worker in a compound. Now, what do we know about compounds? These were the mines and the accommodation that was provided by the mines. The mine workers lived in compounds. So he's been sent to a hospital that's on the mine premises. So he's a miner and he is now very sick and he's been sent to hospital. And it's a lament, a sad cry. Right, let's just read the first stanza. As a wild bird caught in a slipknot snare, the plaited tail hairs of a dun-coloured cow almost invisible. So, tethered in the toils of fever, do I lie and burn and shiver while I listen to the buzzing of flies that flutter vainly against cold, hard, deceiving window panes. Like them would I escape, and escaping, hasten to my home that shines in a valley afar, my home, brightest tooth in the jaws of distance. So there is so much there that I can do with analyzing poems, as I was asked. Say to yourself, again, go back to what have we said with intensive reading skills? We've got vocab. Secondly, what is the story? So this is true of your novel, your play, your short story. What is the story? What is going on? So if we look at this, we've got the I, the person saying I, and I says that he would like to escape. Escape from what? From his sickness and from his compound hospital. Let's use the help we've got there. How's he feeling? Let's get red. He says that he is burning and shivering because he is suffering from fever. And he says he is lying there, lying on his bed, and he's listening. What to? The buzzing, yes, the buzz, the buzzing of flies that are against the window panes. Do we know what a window pane is? I'm sure we do. Let's just go down here. And let's get light grey. Okay, so what we've got is the man's bed. I like drawing. I can't draw, not for toffee, but it's really quite helpful. And we're going to put the man on the bed. There he is. And he is suffering from fever. So maybe I should have done him in a lot more red. Do we know what fever is? Yes, of course we know what fever is, because we're in the middle of COVID, right? So we all understand fever. So I've drawn him a bit red. So he's lying on his bed, and he's longing to escape. But he says he lies there and he listens. So now we're going to draw the walls of the hospital room. And he says the window panes. So there's the window, and the pane, P-A-N-E, is the glass of the window. And he listens to the flies. I don't know if I use a black, you can't see that black. What about dark purple flies? No, that's, sort of. Okay, so I've got dark purple flies. Just imagine that these are blue bottle flies over here. Right, okay. And he listens to the flies. That is our story. He is a very sick man. He's been taken to the hospital on the mine, and he has a fever, and he's lying there wishing he could escape. Very important, because we had the word. What was the word at the beginning of the poem? Doesn't matter if you're studying this poem or not. It was the word captive. He feels he's a captive because he's caught by the fever. And he's probably also caught by the contract. You know, he'll be a miner on contract, and he isn't allowed to go home. Right. So in what way does he feel the same as the flies? They are also captive. So the man and the flies, both of them, let's do them like this. They are both captives. Right. Have we got the story? Let's look again. As a wild bird caught in a slipknot snare, the plaited tail hairs of a dun-coloured cow almost invisible. So, tethered in the toils of fever do I lie and burn and shiver. Do we know shiver? Shiver. Shiver. You're very, very cold, and you're also burning hot. So he lies and he shivers, and he listens to the buzzing of flies that are fluttering. Do we know flutter? Flutter, little wings. So they're fluttering against the window panes. Like them, like the flies, would I escape. So vocab, slightly old-fashioned use of would. Would here means I wish I could. I want to. Would I escape? I wish I could escape, but there's a but there. But I can't. Okay? Let's just go back to our story. And escaping, and if he escaped, he would hasten. I seem to do lots of Hamlet now. We know, I just want to go back to my color for vocab. Where's my vocab? Here. Hamlet says, haste me to know it, that I will, with thoughts as swift as whatever, I will sweep to my revenge. This is all Hamlet for those of you who are doing Hamlet. Hasten is adding the in suffix. Hasten is the verb. I would go swiftly. Both of these mean quick. Okay, so if he could escape, he would go quickly where? Home. All right, so what do? I am helping you by picking out the key things and leaving out some of the little difficulties for the moment, just so we get the story. Now, you've got to do this, whether you are reading like chapter, you've also asked me to look at Cry the Beloved Country, which I will try to. You've got to understand the story. If you're doing My Children, My Africa, or the short stories, and you're doing The Wall, or Chip of Glass Ruby, or whatever you're doing, you need to know the story. What's it basically about? So before we move on into the poem, we've got the basic story. Before we leave this poem, I want to look more closely. What did we leave out? What didn't we look at? Well, possibly we should just start with things like buzzing. One of the things you need to know, and I thought I actually had a question here. Yes, Shibu Mahlo, you've asked for figures of speech. It's best, if you want me to do figures of speech, tell me if you're looking at a past paper 1, where the problems were in that paper, or give me your literary set work, and I will work with figures of speech from what you are doing. So if you say you're doing Othello or Macbeth, I will know which text to use. So just give me a little bit of help here. So you get figures of speech in paper 1, in your comprehension paper, and in paper 2, and then you're meant to use figures of speech in paper 3. So it's all 3 papers, and you need to give me a little bit of help. So Shibu, I'm now dealing with figures of speech. Even though you might not be doing captive, it's the same skill. So I'm trying to answer you as well. Buzzing is onomatopoeia. Right. On, O, mat, O, P-O-E-I-A. Okay, that's how I remember how to spell it. I go on, O, mat, O, P-O-E-I-A. On, O, mat, O, P-O-E-I-A. Get anywhere inside your head if you've got to spell something. So buzzing is onomatopoeic. It gives you the sound of the flies, which echoes the fact that they're fluttering. I can't find flutter. There it is. They're fluttering, the sound of their wings. And it suggests a very irritating, droning, continuous sound here. Right. He says, so I'm going to come back to this. Vocab, tethered in the toils of fever. Let's pull that out and go down here, and we're going to do tethered in the toils of fever. Okay. Figure of speech. The T is repeated, so it is alliteration. Now, I think that alliteration is one of the most difficult figures of speech to discuss. If the alliteration is a sound, and the sound supports the meaning, then it's not actually that difficult. So I think of a poem by T.S. Eliot. He talks about the rain, and he says the rain beats on broken blinds. So the B alliteration helps to create this thud. Do you know a thud? Boom, 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 thudding sound of heavy rain. So if the alliteration creates a sound, and the sound supports the meaning, it's easier to discuss. But it doesn't here. Right, let's just do vocab. If you are tethered, Again, I seem to be doing Hamlet all the time. If I have a post, a little pole, right? And I say I want to tether my sheep. I want to tether my sheep to the pole. What am I doing? Let's go back to my gray. I am tying up my sheep to the pole. So tether is a rope. Or if it were a very, very small thing, a piece of string. And if it's a big, vicious dog with big teeth, okay, big teeth, then it might be a chain. But to tether is to tie up. Right, now toils. Toils are, it's like a net. So the toils of what? In fact, there's more than one figure of speech here. Right, we've got the toils of fever. Right, so we all understand fever. So fever is seen as a net. Right, and he's inside the net. Put him in here. So he's inside the net. He is caught in the fever. Are we okay with that? But the T and the T, this doesn't make him more caught. Imagine there I am, and I'm burning hot, and I've got the fever, and then I'm freezing cold. In what way does tethered in the toils of fever make that more effective? It doesn't. So be very careful here. You can't say, if you say these T's more loudly or more, let's use a blue, more vigorously, that somehow that makes him more caught in the fever the way a person would be caught in a net, because it doesn't. But alliteration is a sound device. What is its primary function? Its primary function is to link, to join. It joins the idea of being tied up, to the net, the trap that is in which he is caught. All right? Do we understand caught? Caught in a net, caught in a trap, caught in the toils. So it is linking the idea of the trap and the idea of being tied. So what is being emphasized is the fact that, I'm going to turn my head, he cannot escape. That's what's being emphasized. The T's are linking what's happened to him, he's tied up, with where he's tied up in this net, and as a result, he's caught firmly. He's caught absolutely. There is no escape for him. And the T alliteration emphasizes the idea of the lack of escape by linking these words through the sound. Now, I actually think that's quite hard. So if you're asked to discuss alliteration, it might actually be a very challenging question for you. Right. However, there's another figure of speech. What can we see here? Let's get a light blue. What can we see? The toils of fever. Look at the drawing. Fever is seen as a net. Is fever a net? No. I'm using the picture of a net to describe fever. The man is suffering from fever. This is the literal. But I am using a picture of a net to show you he can't escape. So I'm using metaphor. So this here is the metaphor. This here is the alliteration. Okay? Right, let's go back. So, tethered in the toils of fever, do I lie and burn and shiver, listening to the flies that flutter vainly, vocab, in vain. Let's get another color. In vain means vainly, uselessly. In other words, they can't get out. Where's my picture? Here. The flies can't get out of the window the way he can't escape from the fever. So the flies are buzzing against the window pane. Why? because it's glass and they can see the outside. So they bang against it, but they can't get through it. Okay? So vainly, useless, pointless, purposeless, no good, not helping at all. Against the window panes. The window panes are described as, I need another color. What about a nice bright green? They are cold and hard and deceiving. And I'm wondering here if we're looking at personification. Very possibly. Another figure of speech. Remember, let me just find my metaphor. Hang on. Where's my metaphor? Fever isn't actually a person. So this picture describes fever, and a net isn't a person either. So fever is being described as a net. A net is not a person, so this is a metaphor, right? But if I say that the window, the glass of the window is cold, okay, that could just be literal. It's cold. Hard, that could also be literal. But when I get to deceiving, am I pushing this to suggest that the windows almost have a personality now? That the window is deceiving? Because only people can deceive. I can deceive you. I trick you. Do we understand deceive? Deceive is when you pretend. You seem to be one thing, but you're not. So for me, by that, even looking back at the hard and cold, it's almost as if the windows had a personality almost from here, but definitely there. Windows can't deceive. Why are they deceiving? Because they are glass. And the flies think they can fly through the glass and escape, get outside the hospital. But they can't because the glass is solid. So they can see the outside, but they can't get there. So they're deceiving in that they promise escape. They promise, look, here's the outside, here's the air outside. They make the flies think that they can get out, but they can't. So I think personification. Right, so hang on. Where were we? Like them would I escape, and escaping hasten to my home that shines in a valley afar. Vocab, it just means far away. It's an old-fashioned word in the way that vain is slightly old-fashioned, do I lie is slightly old-fashioned, would I escape is slightly old-fashioned. Okay, he wants to hurry. If he could escape, he would hurry to his home, brightest tooth in the jaws of the distance. So, when he describes his home, is there actually a tooth and jaws? No. So we've got another metaphor. Right. So we come down here. He says if he could, he would hurry to his home. And we're going to imagine that it's a thatched hut, because I think he's going to the rural area. So I want to make it like rural. So he would rush. Where is he? Where's my man? He would hasten, he would hurry to his home. But his home is there in the distance. It's far away. In fact, I drew it far too big. So we're going to draw it even further away. There is his home. And he says it's far in the distance. And he says it is the brightest tooth in the jaw of the distance. Do we understand jaws, right? Jaws. So you've got to be able to draw a jaw. Okay, let's try to draw a jaw. I'm hopeless at this, guys. So that would be my bone at the top. At least nobody's laughing out there, which is really rather comforting. Right, and then here are my teeth in the jaw. Okay? So he says there is one tooth that is the brightest tooth. So if you've got the jaw of the person or an animal or something, okay, There's this person's jaw, right? There's his jaw. And we've got this really, really bright tooth. Maybe you even imagine that the jaw is open, so it's like this, okay? And I don't know, connection there, and then he's got his teeth. There's this bright tooth, right? And the distance is seen as quite dark. I don't think this is going to draw it, no. Anything going to make it quite, there's a bit blacky. Okay, so what you need to see is the distance is black. Okay, there's the distance, and it's dark. And against the darkness of the distance, there is this bright tooth that shines, and that he's rushing towards my man, rushing towards his home. Okay, so let's go back to the line and see if it's a little bit clearer with all my weird drawings. Right. He says, my home is the brightest tooth in the jaws of distance. Okay? So, oops, no, that's not what I want. Right. So, his home is like this bright light shining, and he can see it from afar. And what do we associate with light? There's hope and joy, happiness, bliss, intense happiness. I mentioned bliss today in class. And this is what it is. It's this bright, shining tooth in the distance. And he can see his home. But it's like in the jaws of the distance, in the darkness of a mouth of this person or this creature. And he's looking, it's as if he's looking into the mouth, and there's the tooth shining and drawing him forward. Okay, right. What else? So that was another metaphor. Right. The word so here introduced the idea that he's trying to explain. But here is the as. As a wild bird caught in a slipknot snare, right? So I lie tethered in the toils of fever. As a wild bird caught in a slipknot snare, so do I lie tethered in the toils of fever. As a bird, I. What is he describing? Himself. What is the image he is using? The image of the bird. It's got the as. So which figure of speech do we have? Shibu, figure of speech, please. It is a simile. He is comparing himself, my man, to a bird. Oh, blimey. Bird, bird, bird. Gosh, that doesn't look like a bird. Looks a bit like a rat, but that's my bird, right? Now, the bird is caught in a snare. There's the first introduction to the image that we've already looked at, the image of a snare or a net, a trap. Do we understand a trap, a net? So this is a sustained metaphor. So look at the idea of entrapment. Who's trapped? Not tapped, trapped. He is, the flies are trapped, and now the bird in the simile is trapped. It's trapped in a slipknot snare. And I'm just wondering, can I use any of these chords? No, they're a bit short. Okay, right, I'm going to try and use this chord, okay? Please could you send your questions like 2 days in advance, because then I could actually bring a piece of string. Okay, I've got this, right? If I do it, can you see it? If I do it like that, and I put that through there, I hope I'm not actually going to destroy all the electrics in this studio. That's a slipknot, that one, okay? Just checking that you can see it, right. So if I pull on it, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. That's why it's a slipknot, right? The place that you might have seen it, seriously, is in movies when people are hanged. Look at it. That's the slipknot. Okay? Are we okay with the slipknot? Now, I am a very urban girl. I know very little about what it is like to live on a farm? I trust that you guys know a whole lot more than I do. Okay, so we're told in this poem, and I'm just talking from this poem because I don't know from my own knowledge, that people create the slipknot snare. So I'm just going to draw it like that for a bird, all right? And I presume the bird puts its little feet. I mean, I really don't know. If somebody has better information, please tell me. So I'm presuming this little bird puts his little feet into the slipknot, and then it tightens, and then let's do it in a slightly different color. Then it tightens around his little feet, and he can't get away, right? Okay. Now, you saw me trying to make this slipknot using this electrical cord that I've got here. What do people apparently use in the rural areas? I mean, tell me, help me here. According to this, they use the tail hairs. Let me get a black. They use the tail hairs of a cow, and they plait the tail hairs. And the cow is dun colored. So the slipknot is almost invisible. Okay, let's try and see if we can get that right. Okay, here's our slipknot. Oh, blimey, I can see what I have to draw now. I have to draw a cow. I'm not very good at this. Cow. Large body, udder, cow's head. Cow. I don't know how to draw a cow. Moo cow. Would somebody come in? Oh, no, it looks like a bird. Okay, cow. This is a cow, okay? All right. Now, the cow's tail, okay, so it's got that. So that's it. And then it's got hairs, right, at the end of cow, right? Cow, moo, right. It's got hairs. They are dun colored. About the closest is that, actually. That's quite nice. That's a dun colored hair. So apparently the people pull out the hairs of the cow. How long are these hairs? Could somebody help me here, please? Okay, let's imagine that it's like that. Then they plait them. I've got nothing to plait here. All right, plait. Plait is what people do with their hair, right? You take 3 pieces of hair, right? And you go over, under, over. Plaited. Most of my students know what plait is. They just don't know that that's the spelling of plait. They go, oh, is that how you spell plait? Yes, that's how you spell plait, right. So they take these thin hairs, like, hairs, right, and they plait them, and they make the slipknot snare. There it is. They make it out of the hair of the cow. Right, good. Can we go back to the poem? As a wild bird caught in a slipknot snare, there is your key word, caught, captive, trapped. And this dash, okay, punctuation. What does this dash tell you? This dash tells you, I'm going to tell you more about the slipknot snare. This is the information about the slipknot snare. I'm telling you about the snare. That's the plaited tail hairs of a dun-colored cow, almost invisible. That's why the bird doesn't see it. So, in the same way that a bird is caught in the snare, so, tethered in the snare of fever do I lie. So, he is like the bird in that he is trapped. Like the bird, they are trapped here. So he is trapped by the fever. The flies are trapped inside the room and they're against the window. And the bird in his image, in his picture, in his simile, the bird is trapped in the snare made by the hair of the cow. Right. Let's read the first stanza again. As a wild bird caught in a slipknot snare, the plaited tail hairs of a dun-colored cow almost invisible, so, tethered in the toils of fever, do I lie, and burn and shiver, while I listen to the buzzing of flies that flutter vainly against cold, hard, deceiving window panes. Like them, would I escape, and escaping hasten to my home that shines in a valley afar, my home, brightest tooth in the jaws of distance. It occurs to me that I've left two things out. Let me get another color. Let's get an orange. First of all, the repetition of home, to show how much this man longs to go home, away from the mine, and I'm assuming Johannesburg, but it could be anywhere on the reef, Kimberley, the diamond mines, coal mines, but think of the gold mines. He wants to go home. Do we understand long? He yearns. Yearns is to feel so strongly for something that you want and that you can't get. And then it occurred to me as well, we've got an H alliteration. Look, hasten and home. Once again, do you see the alliteration doesn't work by hasten home? But what is it stressing? If I could get out of here, I would hurry. I would rush to my home. It is emphasizing how important his home is to him by linking the home to how quickly he would move. Right, so when I talk about intensive reading, this is intensive reading. If you are studying poetry, if you are FAL, home language students, you have to study poetry. This is what you have to do with every single poem. And it's taken us actually quite a long time to do one stanza of one poem. So that's the effort required when you do intensive reading. So if you say, how do I study poetry? This is how you study poetry.